Hi everyone, Megan here from Romance by the Book with the lovely Marielle.
Hello.
And this is our discussion for April's book of the month, which was Marielle's throwback pick, Lord of
It's
Scoundrels by
my
Loretta.
fave.
So good. Oh my gosh. So if you want to see our recaps, those are in our highlights. And we had so much fun talking about this book. And now we're going to talk about it some more. And
If
like how
anyone
we
at
think
any
about it,
point
how it
reads
worked
this
for us.
book,
And yeah.
I was going to say, if anyone at any point reads this book, you can hit me up because
Yes,
I can talk about it
definitely.
forever.
Oh my gosh, it's so fun. So, these two characters are so unique to me, even for the time period that the book was written in. I guess it's like the early 90s, right? Early to mid 90s.
Yeah.
Um, and 95 maybe, I can't remember. And so I feel like Jessica Trent is like a perfect romance heroine. She's such a badass. She takes zero crap from him. She throws back everything he tries to give her, she throws back perfectly. Like she is just amazing. And it's interesting because
Sorry, I just looked it up. It's in
oh,
1995.
okay. So
Hmm.
it's interesting to me because I feel like Jessica has a lot of traits which for some current heroines might make them like unlikable heroine, like this thing that people say about heroines. And I'm like, it's interesting because the way that they fit together with her, I don't think that label fits her at all. But so many of the traits she has
Yeah.
are traits that you might see in what someone might call an unlikable heroine. So I think
Yeah,
it's
she's
so
very
interesting.
straightforward. She
Hmm.
says exactly what she means.
Hmm.
She doesn't take crap from anybody with she like when her brother does something dumb, she's like, that was
You're a
dumb.
dumbass. Yeah.
She has no yeah, and she doesn't let anybody like try to change her like view of what's happening. She's like, nope,
Mhm.
I see what's going on, and this is which yeah, I
Let me
think
tell you why you're wrong.
100%.
It's
Um,
amazing. And meanwhile, Dane is, your typical old school romance hero. He's very
very.
alpha, he's very much a rake, he's very you know,
And he knows
he's like the
best.
head boy in charge, you know what I mean? Like all his friends follow him around like he's the
Yeah,
Pied
he's the
Piper.
Lord of Scoundrels, right? He's like
Yeah.
the head bad boy of the.
Yes, absolutely. And so it's interesting because a lot of what comes into play with him is this emotional immaturity that he has because of his childhood, which of course you see right off the bat in the prologue,
Yeah.
everything that happened to him and why he is the way he is. But seeing it play out and all the damaging effects it can have on his own life and on other people's lives, it was really interesting to me.
Yeah, when Fated Maids talked about Lord of Scoundrels, I think they had a discussion with Adriana Herrera,
Oh, mhm.
who Adriana Herrera, sorry, I always like say it like I don't know how to say it, but I do.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, they talked about that prologue and how it's real long. Like a lot of times prologues will be like kind of short and kind
Right.
of, just like just
And you might even
before
see
this
both
happened.
people like in the past, like not necessarily
Mhm.
focused on one of them. Yeah.
No, but we get like his whole life story.
Hmm.
It's kind of like
And it's a hot mess
previously
too, poor
on
thing.
Dane's life, and it tells you like from his birth, from before his
Before
birth.
his birth, from his dad losing his first family to typhus in leading into marrying his mom and then his birth. It's like you
Yeah,
literally get everything.
everything. Yes. And it is needed. And that's a thing that they discussed on Fated Mates, where it was kind of like this is a book where you needed to know who this guy was before you
Yes.
met him
Otherwise you would have
because
hated his guts.
well also some of the stuff he does like you're like this makes no sense, what is wrong
Yeah.
with you, but
Yeah.
so you're like
Yes.
this is what's going on here.
Hmm.
um I always loved the book. I feel like listening to other people discuss it because I will like if someone's talking about it I'm
Hmm.
like yes.
Speaking of which,
um
if everybody's watching, I think you will this month, earlier this month, Learning the Tropes did like their own take on Lord of
that's right.
Scoundrels as well. So if you're into it, go listen to that also.
Yeah. And people like, I think it's fun because people always like have a reaction to this book, and the opinions can be different. I think when I first read it, I didn't fully, I couldn't fully articulate like why I loved it so very much.
Mhm.
But I do think that it has something to do with the fact that we are reading about two people. Um, this heroine is very practical and very like intentional when she does things. She knows what she's doing and
Mhm.
she's doing it on purpose.
Mhm.
Like
Even if nobody else can see that, she
99.9% of
always
the
knows what
time.
she's doing.
Pardon?
Even if nobody else thinks that or can see like why she is doing, she knows exactly what she's doing all the time. Yeah.
Yes. And and then we
Unlike
have a
him.
hero. Yeah, and we have a hero who is very high strung, so many feelings, and
Mhm.
he's a man who grew up basically being told like you're not supposed to feel things. You like, did your mom die? You can't be
Feelings? What
upset
are
about
those?
that.
Yeah.
That's terrible. Like, it's like it's very, he's not allowed, but he has so many
So many.
feelings and he's
Yeah.
so dramatic in his head. I feel like especially in our like the second and the third recaps that we did, we kept going like so dramatic
So dramatic.
because
He really is. And it's
and he
fascinating
like
to me too.
hoarding like little, but like he's like, oh, she left her umbrella at my house. I will keep it forever. And you're like, this is so it's like, yes, he is like a stereotypical alpha hero, but also he's
But
not.
also not at all. Yeah.
And it's
He
fun to
he
watch
that's what
them.
he puts out to the world, but no one really knows him until she knows him. And you get
And
to know him
she
at the same
clocks
time.
him like immediately.
Oh yeah.
It
Oh
does
yeah.
tell us a bit about how she spent a lot of time like raising like 10 children for her family because she was like the go-to
And mostly
babysitter since
boys,
she's
I
a
think.
spinster. Yeah, and mostly boys. And so she seems to like very quickly, like he does a thing and she's like, oh, I see what you're doing. And he's just like, I am not. And she's
Yeah.
still
You
like,
don't know
still,
me.
yeah, I still see what you're doing.
She's like, actually, I definitely do. It's funny too because the way that they relate to each other, I mean, it's definitely insta lust for both of them, which is mighty inconvenient for both of them because she's
Yeah.
a lady and he doesn't mess around with ladies because he's Beelzebub, the dark prince, whatever. Like he doesn't mess around with, nice people. And meanwhile, she is sworn to hate him because he's trying to ruin her brother's life inadvertently. And she's like, I can't like him. This is terrible.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
so it's
And she
just,
has plans. Like we enter
yeah,
this book with she's like, I've got plans. This is what I'm doing in my future. Birdie now had to come like
deal with his
deal
idiot self.
with this, but she has like she's doing things.
Mhm.
She doesn't have time for this. It's inconvenient. And
Very
he
inconvenient.
and she knows that he's not gonna be like an easy
No, not
person.
at all. Not at all. And to watch that insta lust turn into the kind of love that they have for each other by the end of the book was really awesome. And
Mhm.
I was curious about the ways in which that was similar to what we see now with because I feel like insta lust is not necessarily out of the ordinary, be it historical or
Yeah.
contemporary. Um, but the way that it bore fruit later was different to me than a lot of those stories, and I thought
I
that was
think a lot of times it's treated as like love at first sight in that they're like already in love. And in this, it's like
they
not
just want
really.
each other,
Mhm. Yeah.
even though
And
they
as
kind
they
of
get
hate
to
each
know
other.
each other, yeah. And as they get to know each other, then it's like, man, like we really do
Really
fit
fit.
well together. Um, I want to say something else too. Oh, and a lot of books now will do like a happy for now kind of situation where you're just like, I
You can see
believe
they're
that
on
you
the
guys can.
road to right. Yeah, and this is definitely far beyond that.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I don't know. I think it's uh they were just so clearly made for each other. And I think the way that they related to each other, the nitpicking, the name calling, the shit talking, like they just poked at each other constantly. And that was like foreplay for them. And clearly they both liked it. It worked for both of them. And I think that would not be the case if it was anyone else. And
I
I thought
think
that was really interesting too.
yeah, it was. And I also think that beyond like being like it was insta lust, but they were also very quickly like interested in the other one. Like I think that Dane quickly, like as soon as he tried to like scandalize her with the watch and
Right.
realized that she knew what that thing was all along,
Yes.
he was
It's
immediately
like,
like,
oh,
who
you're
is this?
interesting.
Yeah.
I want to know about you. Yeah,
Yes.
for sure.
And there were like at that very first scene, he was like, I need to get out of here. But she did a thing, and he then immediately was like, what? Wait, what are you thinking? What's going on?
Yeah.
And she never like she kept him on his toes the whole time. So he like beyond being like attracted to her,
Right.
he couldn't stop like trying to figure out what was going on or what she was doing or what she was thinking or what,
Yeah.
even when
And funny enough, he was so interested in it, and yet he got it wrong so much.
there is a
He
point
totally
after they
misjudged
had
almost
sex.
every interaction they ever had, which
Yes.
he realizes at one point, and he's like, "Oh no, like, this is wrong, wrong, wrong the whole time."
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
after they had sex the first time,
yeah,
she comes out and is like, I was overwrought, but this is what happened. Like she's very like they have
yeah,
a very nice little communication, and we're in his head, and he's like, oh, thank God for I actually got this one right. I actually understood what was happening. Whew.
yes.
And then she says something that completely like dismantles that feeling in him. So
About like wanting him from the beginning, and he's like, "What?" He had
yeah,
no clue. He doesn't think
no.
anybody wants him, and of course, again, that all leads back to his childhood, his mother leaving him, his dad being a piece of crap. Like it's
People say he's
all,
hideous. Well,
yeah.
yeah.
It's a lot. Poor Dane. He really has a lot of baggage, poor thing.
He does. And it's like
And
he
most of
thinks
it is not his fault in any way, but like, wow, it's a lot.
but he still has to deal with it. And I think that's
Yeah.
the part that makes this really like resonate. And for me, even like all these years later, like this book is almost 30 years old.
Mhm.
And I feel like it still works
Yes.
because he has all these like we know he has issues. We know that the way he acts is for reasons.
Yep.
And Jessica knows it too. Like she knows what she's getting into. She knows what he's like. She won't let him get away with stuff.
Mm-mm.
And that's the other thing is
She
that
calls
she's
him right
like,
out.
yeah, and she's willing to work with him on stuff, but then there does come a point when it has to do with his son that she's just
You got to
like
grow up.
I don't like I can't help you through this and you are not as important as what's happening over here. So you're going to have to figure out how to deal with this
Right.
yourself.
Get it together because you are the one that has to do this. If I have to do it, it's going to be in a way you don't like. And so if you want it done, you're going to have to do it yourself.
Yeah.
And yeah, and she cuts him no slack at that point. And it's after, months of cutting him nothing but slack pretty much. So I think it's fair.
Yeah, I mean, well, she works with him as much as like it feels reasonable. It feels like she understands that he's got stuff, and so
Mhm.
she's gonna like do her best. But then there comes a point where
Like, okay,
she
that's
does
it.
it after they have sex the first
Figure it
time
out.
too. She does that like, okay, whew, but we're not doing this anymore. Like I
I'm
can't
not
be
going to
chased.
chase you around and like seduce you. Like this is not my job. Like this is your turn now.
He does take that on that
Yes,
challenge.
he does.
um,
He
but
does.
yeah, I think it's very fun to like see them. Um, I think as an also if we're talking a little bit tropes like as an enemies to lovers,
Mhm.
it feels like she enters the picture like feeling like okay,
This
this
man is
guy
ruining my life.
we need to get rid of him. We need
Yeah,
to like this is her she's come in with a mission and the mission is extract Dane from
from
my
her
brother's
brother's life.
life and that's and then we go away.
Yes.
And he when she finds the icon and he like they have that whole interaction also sets them up as like a in a
Adversaries,
an
like,
adversarial, yeah, and he and she is very um she's she's trying to be reasonable at that point and he is like how dare you not do exactly the things the way that I said them? And she's like, I'm giving you a better deal. And he doesn't get it.
Mm-mm.
But the, but
His
because they
pride.
are who they are,
Hmm.
it still doesn't feel, it doesn't feel mean in the way that some
Yes.
old school historical enemies to lovers feel. And I think even now,
Especially
like it's a
because
tricky
so much
balance.
so mean. And you're like, I'm supposed to like him now? Like, why though?
Mhm. Like you're
It's
abusive.
hard. Yeah. And I think this really wrote a fine line on that. And it really came out on the right side of it. And
Yeah, it's hard because even modern books, I think, tend to be um, like not even enemies so much as like
right,
adversaries or like we are working on opposite teams at work or, like
right.
it's,
Or they want the same job or something. Yeah. Hmm.
mhm,
It's interesting because when you were just talking about it being the whole enemies to lovers of it all, it kind of made me think about another one that rode a fine line but worked for me, which was A Heart of Blood and Ashes by Mel
mhm,
that he is mean, but
yeah,
you know why he's being mean and you understand the situation even though she does too, kind of. I mean, she knows she didn't do the thing that he thinks she did,
yeah,
but she knows he thinks so, and so she understands where he's coming from. And it's really fine line, and a couple times where I was like, oh man, that was almost too far for me. Like I
mhm.
really wanted
And
to hit
then once he
him with it.
figures it out, though, he does, you know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
there's that right back and forth where you're like, me, oh,
Yeah.
okay,
Mhm.
yeah.
And yeah, that was another one that worked for me that I think was different than a lot of them are for me.
Yeah, they also were like definitely like
Really enemy.
you
It's
can't
like familial enemies from
enemies.
way back.
Hmm. Yeah,
So yeah. Um it's what did you think about their whole like rude pet names and stuff like that? Like what was your like what how do you feel about that in general?
it generally I really loved it in the way that I enjoy read. Part of the reason I love romance, I think, is because it shows it can in its best forms, like show so many different ways
Mm,
of being in love and like having a relationship and how like something might not work in my personal relationship, if I went around like sniping at my partner, he would not be like he would
would not
not
be into
find that
it.
like yeah, like that wouldn't be a turn on for him.
Yeah,
We wouldn't end up like play wrestling in the bed. Like that
right.
would not be how it would work out.
Yeah,
Feelings would be hurt.
yeah.
But it's I do know that there are people who like love to trash talk and how that like is fun. And I think it's
Yeah.
cool to see a relationship where like in the beginning Dane is definitely using it as a way to like push like make distance and
Mhm.
push Jessica away from him,
Yes.
that her responses are always like
Not what he
then
expects.
he's like, dang it, I don't want to hang
Well, and I
out.
think he almost takes it like she's trying to one up him.
Uh-huh,
And
at
he's like,
first.
"Oh, like she like this is like." And I guess sometimes she is sort of trying to do that, but sometimes she's just showing him that like he's not getting to her,
Mm-hmm.
even though that's what he wants, which is important because he has to know that she can deal with him and
Yeah.
his mercurial self.
Well, and the thing is that they speak each other's language. Like even from the beginning, like she'll say something and he gets it. Like even her brother who grew up with her is like, just
What?
stop using those big words. And he like, what did she say? And he's like, oh, here's what like he absolutely knows what she's saying and at all times, which is cool because when they do have to sit down and have like serious conversations, which
Mhm.
does happen a few times, like two or three times during the book, there are situations where they're like, we need to like we need to talk this out.
Yeah.
They're able to do that. They're able to have a conversation that is respectful, that is clear, where
Mhm.
both of them are like, here is what is happening. These are my my needs, and they work stuff out. So it's kind of it's an it's interesting to see people who like obviously enjoy each other
Yeah.
in a way that like do you know what I mean? Like I personally wouldn't
Right.
enjoy that kind of an interaction, but it's fun to watch them enjoy
Yeah.
each other that way.
Yeah. I so agree. Um, I think we've talked a little bit about the prologue already, but I really just think it's so interesting. I don't know that I've ever read one the same way that just really had everything you need to know about this man before you meet him was
Hmm.
there. And so, and I think it wouldn't have worked. He wouldn't have worked as a character in the same way for me if I didn't know all those things about him up front, especially with how mean he can be and how antagonistic and how he like just cavorts around and does whatever and doesn't
Yeah,
care about anybody. Like you know him though, and so you understand. Whereas if you didn't have that, like you'd be like, this dude, like you like him? Why? He's
yeah.
horrible, and even though she doesn't know all of those things up front, she still knows him. She can tell that other things are bubbling beneath the surface,
Hmm.
and uh and that it's mostly, armor, which you find pretty much in that first interaction between them in the cafe where he's like, I'm gonna ruin you, and she's like, oh honey, I've already ruined you, sorry about it. Like, and
I'm
it's
sorry to
just
tell you.
it's so perfect because she just knows like he thinks he's getting one over on me, and actually I'm ruining him right now just sitting here.
Yeah, yeah. It's I think the more, and because this is one of my few like rereads that I like really reread pretty regularly. And I don't like go back and just read a scene. I this book is a book that if I pick it up,
Yeah.
I will read the whole thing. Um, and it's every time I read it, I start to see more and more that he's so sensitive, and he was since he was a little kid, and just he was never allowed to be like sweet and have feelings, and because his mom
His dad
was
was a
having
monster.
problems, his dad like that was not going to stand. He needed something else from his lineage, and and then he went to school and that wasn't going to be allowed there either, so he is smart enough to learn, and he learned all the wrong lessons, but he was like, oh okay, if I have money, then I can buy and what I need and no
Right.
one will laugh at me. If
Mhm.
I am with all these bad kids, then no one is gonna like, if they're gonna look down their noses at me, it's gonna be because of the things that I want, not because of,
Right.
any other reasons that might hurt my feeling that I don't have. Um,
What feelings? Yeah.
but then he meets Jess, and Jess is like, she sees all those things, and she's interesting, and
She's interested in him and
she's
actually
interesting.
knowing him, which nobody else really is. His friends like him because he's rich and he's fun and he brings around, you know, fun times and prostitutes and things that they want to do, and they're like into that. They don't really care about him.
There's
His
only the
family didn't
one.
care about him.
There's
Like,
only that one. I forgot his name, the foreign one, who had warned him,
Esmond.
Esmond, yeah, who warned him about like, oh, this body house seems like it might not be. I get a bad feeling, and then he's warned him about a couple of things. He's the only one who seems like he doesn't really want anything from
He doesn't
Dane.
really have an agenda. Yeah. And he's the one who comes and gets her from the police station and stuff too. And
Hmm.
tries to like patch it up, basically. Yeah, it's and he doesn't appreciate that because he doesn't realize it because nobody has ever cared about him.
I don't
And so
think he
he
like
fell apart.
noticed. I don't think it like even like dawns
Yeah.
on him that there might be like this is a potential like real friend, because
Yeah.
he doesn't do that.
He doesn't have that. Yeah. He's such a fascinating character. Oh my
Hmm.
gosh.
And Jessica too. Like
Mhm.
Jessica, she has a plan. She wants to like be independent and have her own things and do like she's like I could have gotten married 20 million times over, She's pretty, which in a way that is very like old school heroine pretty, like beautiful dark hair and the like flashing gray eyes, and everybody loves her, and she's so like svelte and beautiful, and when she dresses
Yeah.
up, and Dane is like, what a hideous hat. Like he doesn't, we don't ever really get a focus on, you know what I mean? Like we don't get
Yeah.
the like, I my hand can span across her waist. We don't get that. We get like, ugh, that frippery
And
is just
bonnet. Ugh, yeah.
like,
And then she hits him with the bonnet, which makes it like even funnier. Yeah,
yeah.
it's so good. It's so
Well,
good.
it is. He
So
like sees
good.
her in that dress, that ball gown, and he's just like, wow, that is an architectural marvel. Like, I don't know how that's working. And you're like, thanks, friend.
Oh my God, it's so good, y'all.
Mhm.
Go read this book. If nothing else convinces you to read this book, know that you will read about two characters who are truly great. Like
Yeah.
just great, great characters that you want to know about and care about and see be happy. It is really just wonderful.
So, what did you think? Because I feel like of the two, and this is also a very kind of old school romance thing to happen, right? Is that they're kind of isolated. Like they've got people, but not really,
Right.
except for Genevieve. So, what did you think of Jessica Trent's grandmother, who might be my very favorite?
She was amazing. Like, I think we talked about it maybe in the first recap when she mentioned, like, he sounds like you should reel him in. And she's like, well, he's a shark. And she's like, so find a harpoon. Like, she's
Yeah.
like ready. She knows the world. She's been married. She's had lovers. She does not give two F's about anybody's opinion. Like, she does what she wants to do. And Jessica emulates her in a lot of ways because she
Mhm.
loves that about her. And so you really get a sense of Jessica by knowing more about Genevieve. And even I think there's a scene where he's talking about meeting Jessica, and a few of the people at the table know Genevieve. So they're like, oh, of course, like, of course, right? Like, of course her granddaughter is
Yeah.
like that, you know? And
And they're
I
like, she was at the cafe. Oh, two of them in Paris? Oh my.
like,
Like, it's
yeah,
just gonna be.
right, like we're all gonna die. It's gonna be crazy. And she's just so smart, and she wants Jessica to have everything she wants in life,
Mhm.
as any grandmother would. And she's given her a lot of the tools to be able to make that happen. And I loved her. She was
Yeah.
wonderful.
She's in the background, but also like she is getting it. Like she, by the end of that book, has herself a smart, wealthy duke of a boyfriend who like can
He's
get
like taking
Jessica the
Gertie in
best
hand
lawyers.
and like
He's
dealing
yeah,
with yeah, like he was about to go call out Dane if he didn't like marry Jessica and all. It was like a whole thing. Yeah. Yeah, I kind of skipped that in the recaps because I was like, it's not really that important to the plot. But yeah,
sure.
Genevieve is there and in the background. And yeah, the boyfriend definitely comes into play later, which he must be pretty freaking special if she's willing to shack up again after all these years.
Yeah. Well, and obviously he's like head over heels for her.
Yeah,
If he's like, your family is my family now. It's like,
right.
oh, okay. Yeah, like, and I love the advice that she gives, but also the way that she's kind of watching out for her granddaughter, and doing her best to like, she was like, you have to go to this ball because if you don't want him to be like
Trying to make
just
him suffer.
losing his mind over here, you can't, you're gonna have to, help him out.
Mhm.
um,
She definitely
also,
understands men in general, and even Dane specifically in some ways, even though she hasn't even, I don't think they've even met at that point. She just like
no,
knows.
I think, but just what Jessica told her that
Yeah,
Jessica's observations, she was
right.
like, there's, you're gonna have to be careful here.
Yeah.
And she does tell her like when with the whole shark that she's kind of like, that's not the kind of man, like you need to reel him in. You don't want that guy
Don't let
trying to
him
reel
go.
you in.
Oh God, yeah.
Well, and she was like, you don't want him trying to reel you in either. Like you've got to
Yeah.
be the one. Which is really interesting for
Yeah.
a woman of that period. She feels
Yeah.
very period appropriate, but also and it's like her children or grandchildren are like embarrassed when she like is living her, and she's just like, what they want to. I mean,
Yeah.
they don't want to put her in a home, but it's kind of like that situation where
Right.
they're
Like they
just
think
like,
she's like a little bit nutty. Yeah.
and
And
she's
Jessica
great.
just loves her and like loves to like she gets her that watch for her birthday and like he's of course intrigued by that, but you get from that scenario that like her grandma is like awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah,
And you
just
do hear secondhand about like when she gave it and how the grandma like
was delighted.
was delighted.
Yeah.
So,
So
oh,
fun. She's a great character too.
yes,
Especially I feel like there are other side characters who might be in it more, but she's more impactful than any of the other side
she's
characters.
very impactful. And you get the sense that like, she might be a grandma, but she's not like she's still fully in her like not in
Right.
maybe not in
She's
her
not like
prime,
out
but
of touch
she's
or
like
whatever. Yeah.
fully like living life, doing things, enjoying, and I love that. I love to see
Hmm.
like an old like somebody's this granny who isn't like just sitting at
A
home
doddering old
crocheting, like
lady, like
yeah,
knitting. Yeah.
she's out there slaying hearts and
Yep.
making like the people at the cafe like all
On
like
Twitter. Yeah.
it's great. She's at the ball dancing with this, like it by what was he, the Comte? Anyway,
Yeah.
she
A French
did.
count. Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
fun.
It was delightful. Just this whole thing. I loved it. Thank you for making me read it. I really appreciate
Yeah,
it genuinely. And everybody read Lord of Scoundrels. It should be on everyone's list 100%.
yeah, it's a great book. So if you don't, if you do and you want to chat, like I said,
Yes, we will
you
always
can
talk about
look
this book.
up.
We want to hear your opinions 100% of the time.
And there are lots of, yeah, there's a few discussions out there in podcasts and other things.
Yep.
Um, I think that Loretta Chase, this might be the book that people like talk about the most for her. And I would say
It's like book 3 of a series or something too, isn't it?
it's that series is like because in the 90s, like books, they weren't
Right.
always like
Series, like,
actually, yeah.
right.
Like
They're
there
very
are
loosely
some
linked.
there's some books like there's one that's like Beaumont's wife and that other guy that was interested in her. Like there's a few there's some characters. There's another book like The Last Hellion, I think, is Birdie.
Oh,
Um
Birdie gets a book?
Birdie has like a novella, I think.
Okay.
And I don't know if it's The Last Hellion or if it's like there's like the
I
Mad
don't know
Earl
if
or
I
something.
care about him as a hero. I'm not gonna lie.
It's an interesting
He's
premise
a
if you look
mess.
it up. Like those books are yeah. So they're like I think they're like related, but I don't know if they're a series where like
Right.
you feel like you have to read them
Right.
all.
No, like I definitely felt like this was a self-contained story. Like you definitely don't need anything else. You just need them and they are amazing.
Yeah. But Loretta Chase is great about including like accurate to the period things like that watch. You
Hmm.
can go on YouTube and find like a historian talking about like
That's what
showing
I
a
want to watch.
watch that was like
Awesome.
this. There's also there are other things that are like that. And if
Yeah.
you she had a blog, and I think on her Instagram she will periodically be like, hey, here's this like
Thing that I
part of
found in my research.
London that actually, yeah, stuff that
That's
she's
cool.
put in her books. But the characters feel so relatable and so like not modern, but like they could live in the modern world and survive.
Yeah.
It's good. There's
Oh my
some
gosh,
books
you
you read and
guys.
you're like, these people,
It's so
they
good. I loved it so much. Oh my gosh, you guys. Well, that's April. It's been a big one and it was a great pick. So we will be back soon and you will know what May's book is before too long and we'll see you then.
see you then. Bye.